Good evening and welcome to this special focus feature on India's automobile industry. It comes, of course, at a time when the whole world is gripped by the corona crisis. It's no different for Indian auto. And remember, there's been so much focus on India's economy, what this crisis means for the way forward for our economy. And then when you think about the auto sector in particular, one of the largest contributors to India's GDP, it's also a sector that provides a massive amount of employment, both directly and indirectly, all across India. And then let's not forget the other clear area that has been in focus, the need for some form of policy change or stimulus to keep that sector shining, given its huge contribution to manufacturing in India. But while the industry waits, perhaps in vain, for that, there is some good news coming in. We've just conducted a massive pan-India survey in association with Brandscapes here at Carandbike, and it shows some very positive messages that the automobile industry will certainly be very happy with. So first up, though, I want to quickly tell you who we will have for you on the show today. We have lined up quite the stellar star cast of panelists. And so there's Tarun Garg, the Sales and Marketing Director at Hyundai Motor India, who will be joining us. Shashank Srivastav represents India's largest car maker, Maruti Suzuki, and he is the Executive Director, Sales and Marketing. He'll also be with us on the show. Stefan Knapp is Director for Volkswagen Passenger Cars India, the man who heads VW's business. He will be on the show as well with us. And Nikunj Sanghi is the Managing Director of JS Four Wheels. He also heads up the Automotive Skill Development Council. And last but not least, Saket Mehra, the auto partner at Grant Thornton Advisory, will also be on the show with us. So lots to take you through, and I want to jump straight into it. Let's get you the big focus, the big headlines, if you will, of what's emerged from this really comprehensive survey that we've conducted. That is from all across the country, over 9 cities, thousands of respondents, and these are then the main talking points, if you will. Evidence of a pent-up demand for automobiles, very strong evidence, and this is something that the auto sector will be very, very pleased about, because there's been some doubt whether or not consumers will come back or not. Huge shift to personal mobility, another sort of expected outcome of the current crisis. Given the need for social distancing, none of that is surprising. So that means no more shared cabs and no more state transport or public transport for a lot of consumers. Customers are likely to now downtrade, though, and hence compact vehicles come into focus because there is a lot more favor for those. Again, not surprising, because people will be very careful how they spend their money. SUVs, surprise, surprise, remain the preferred body style. So even though you might look at compacts, well, people still want SUVs. And so there comes the very, very interesting point about used cars finding greater acceptance. It's always been a massive market. You have more used cars being sold in India in any case, even pre-crisis, than new cars. But now, maybe a renewed focus and an opportunity then for the auto industry when it comes to the used space. So, like I said, there is lots to talk about, lots to take you through. And so let me go ahead and jump in and quickly bring in our guests into this conversation. Tarun Garg from Hyundai Motor is my first guest I'll go to. We've also got Stefan Knapp, who's also joining us in right now. But Tarun, the first question to you then. When you hear this, the outcome of the survey, it's all largely positive. It's all also what we were hoping for in many ways. I guess the industry certainly was. Your first sort of reaction to these very positive moves that the consumer seems to be sending your way from across the country?
Yes, thank you, Siddharth. Yeah, I think it's great news. And frankly speaking, all these 6 weeks of lockdown, we were in touch with our customers, and our findings were very similar. The customer was saying, yes, we want to buy a car, and we are just waiting for the lockdown to open up. And now that 75% of our showrooms are open, I think we can clearly see that these trends are emerging and attraction coming in. In fact, some of the showrooms are already back to 50% of the business which they were doing in the normal times. So I think that is some very, very good news. And we just hope that the traction remains and we are able to really get back to normalcy as soon as possible.
All right. So if you look at what consumers are likely to, of course, look at, 75% of the consumers have said that they will look to buy a car post lockdown. And, they've also not changed their vehicle preference. And that's a massive, staggering majority of people who have told us this. And of course, like I have said before, the inquiries for used cars have also gone up. But the significant thing here for many of you, of course, who are joining me today, Hyundai, Maruti, Mahindra, amongst some of the preferred brands, even as you come through this crisis. Tarun, I will come back to you. I have lots more for you, but we try and get Shashank in as well, since this is obviously good news for him too. But Stefan, if I can come to you, the fact that there was firstly a sort of an unknown. There was a doubt about what consumers would do in this post-COVID scenario. The fact that a lot of people, A, have not changed their mind about buying cars, and then there's also a lot of people who may have been using shared mobility who will now opt for their personal transport. That's obviously good news or reassuring news in a way for a sector that's already been under so much pressure for several months, even before the crisis.
Absolutely. I think we are hungry for every positive information. I think it's necessary that everybody of us stays positive, and this information is a reconfirmation that individual mobility, I think, will last in the minds of our customers. I think it's even more now because the COVID-19 pandemic is kind of moving customers back into individual mobility because they are simply scared. Clearly, I also don't want to be too over enthusiastic. Now you have to see there's also the confidence bit which you have to gain. So you need to work on the essentials. From our experience in China, we clearly saw that you have to sanitize the complete sales and service funnel to regain confidence that people are coming to the showrooms. You have to give the opportunity online sales. Yeah, I think these elements together with let's say a fundamental interest in individual mobility gives us a big opportunity, but we have to overcome the obstacle in order to really come to business.
All right, that's of course something that goes without saying, and there's many layers to that. I understand that. As soon as Shashank is in, we'll of course throw this to him as well. But Stefan, or actually, let me go across to Shashank then. This whole point about how consumers obviously would revise their budgets. They would be careful about where and how they spend their money. So one is about making the decision to purchase new vehicles. But Shashank, if you can also talk to us about how the reassurance part can come from the industry side. What are you telling consumers in terms of, maybe looking at ways to protect some of their investment, offering them better deals or, better finance or some kind of reassurance to say that maybe don't spend all of it up front. We'll give you better sort of incentives to come and still go ahead and buy.
Yeah, Siddharth. So I think during this lockdown period, when absolutely there was no retails, and there was this no business at all for the dealers and for all OEMs as well. We had been contacting the customers. We had a lot of bookings pending for delivery for March. Remember, the lockdown started just before the end of March, which was actually a very auspicious period for deliveries. So it was the Navratra period, if you remember. So what came out from our contact with the consumers is precisely what the survey indicates. A lot of those consumers said that they would buy vehicles. And that is how, that makes us, of course, very happy. Today, we have more than 1,800 showrooms which have opened up as far as Maruti Suzuki is concerned. We have delivered so far almost 8,000 cars already. But I think it is also the time frame which is important. The time in which these people who are wanting delivery will take that delivery. So we have found that when we spoke to the consumers, two things came out very clearly. One is that they would like to have the reassurance regarding both the safety, not just the safety of the investment, but also about the safety of going to showrooms, or even if there is a delivery at home. What is it that the companies are doing? So on our side, we have had a very strong SOP, a standard operating process for dealers. We don't allow dealers to open unless they stick to this SOPs, which is, of course, reassuring to consumers, and we are telling consumers this. The second part was that the consumer said that they would like to have an interaction more in a digital fashion. So we have a very robust digital platform, as you know. so which enables booking and even scheduling test drives and so on and so forth, all information, comparison, etc. On the digital front. So these are the two things which will probably reassure consumers. And for our part, we are, of course, telling consumers, we are very enthused by the response. But as I think one of the panelists said just now, that we also have to see that in the short term, because it's a discretionary purchase, the car purchase, a lot of it depends on sentiment. Coming out of the lockdown, probably the sentiments would be a little suppressed, and I wouldn't be surprised that with some positive news coming through, going forward, the sentiments will keep getting better. And that's, of course, a very positive news for the industry. So these are the two major things which consumers gave feedback, and we are giving assurance to the consumers regarding their purchase of automobiles.
Absolutely, and that's got to be very reassuring for people. And I'm sure even your dealers are happy with the fact that there is a very clear message coming down from the headquarters to them. Stefan, if I can come back to you, we talk about good news for the industry and how, of course, it's been terribly needed, especially right now. How disappointed are you that there isn't like a direct stimulus package still in place for the auto sector?
Yeah, if you ask me personally, I'm an economist for my profession. And I believe the first thing what needs to be done, that we, as OEM, make a clear value proposition to our customers. I think there's this saying of John F. Kennedy. He said, "Don't ask the country what they can do for me. Ask what I can do for the country." I think we really have to offer interesting packages, fully sanitized, a service and sales funnel, a reason to come to the showroom with new attractive products, interesting financial packaging. And then I'm really absolutely sure that our individual mobility is an interesting offer to our customers. But clearly, in such a situation where a lot of employees are at stake, we have representing 7% of the gross domestic product here in India. I think it makes also sense that from a governmental point of view, you are moving some confidence back into the customers. A colleague said the sentiment is essential, and with an incentive program, you can move up the confidence, you can move up the sentiment of the customers. And I believe that all around the world, if you look in Europe, the governments are exactly doing that. They're trying to, on the one side, stabilize the situation. On the second side, they're trying to go forward and to incentivize the growth again. I think it's a combination of our offers, what we are offering, our financial packages, our products. And at the same time, I feel that it's a necessary time for the government also to give a clear signal, come, go, you can be confident, we have it under control, and go for an interesting purchase.
So Stefan, very quickly then, if you can just tell me like the top two things you would like to see happen, because yes, we've seen a lot happening, especially in Europe as well. I mean, we've seen a lot of governments with very specific incentive packages coming out for the auto space and for the auto buyer. We keep hearing about GST cuts being one demand, but if not that, or even if it is that, what's the second thing? Is it scrappage? What's the second big thing you'd like to see happen?
I think it's a combination. For me, I'm always interested in having a win-win situation. If we sell more cars, the government is going to earn more GST. And that is also important for the current situation. If we are getting the old clunkers off the road, I think it's a good impact and also a good influence for environmental situation, which is definitely necessary, as we know. So I think a scrappage program is an interesting option, to get really both, let's say, objectives met. That's more my direction, because I really believe, again, we as OEMs have a clear role to play. We have to make interesting offers, and at the same time, we cannot wait for the government to react. I think we can only ask and recommend and say it would be really a good move in order to gain the sentiment up. And at the same time, we have to show clearly what is the advantage for the government, what is the advantage for the country India.
I've got Saket Mehra, who's the auto partner at Grant Thornton Advisory India. Saket, good evening, and thank you for also joining us today. I have to ask you, when you're in a scenario like this, where it's not just the auto industry, there's many industries that are awaiting some kind of stimulus, but that's not coming. The kind of pressure that the industry has, and this is a stimulus that's been asking for even when the slowdown was happening the last 18 months, but the kind of pressure that they're under. And then, you add to it the fact that you're going to have a curtailed work staff, you're going to have social distancing being adopted, a lot of employees having to work on different kinds of shifts. So basically costs are going up. You also have a situation where you have to sanitize the vehicle, maybe more than once in the case of test drive vehicles, every few hours. So all costs going up. Consumer who is worried about parting with their money and so needs a little hand-holding, perhaps even some discounting. What is the smart way forward for the industry? Because it can't just keep running up the losses.
No, absolutely, Siddharth, rightly put. See, I would look at it more from a macroeconomic standpoint. And this is more to do with the few indices which are there. For example, if you look at the unemployment rate, for example, which is currently at the peak at its peak. Now, when we look at auto industry or say any sector for that matter, it all depends where the demand is going to come. Now, when majority of the sectors in India or even globally are under stress, for example, if you look at hospitality, travel, tourism, this is a sector which contributes almost, let's say, 15% to the GDP, but is down by almost 90%. So that's very clearly indicating that the demand is not going to certainly come from this particular sector, and so as well with the construction sector. Which is again contributing significantly to the GDP, but is in a very bad shape. Now when you already have this kind of a scenario wherein the demand pull is not going to be there, it's certainly going to increase your cost of operations further, because in this uncertainty or this kind of an uncertain environment wherein you can't really predict how the demand or how the consumer behavior would typically look like, it's very difficult for organizations to really do some kind of a scenario building, some kind of a forecasting, and which really leads to additional cost on a day-on-day basis. We have been talking to our clients, across the sectors. I think everyone is facing a similar challenge, and there are sectors and there are clients which are particularly working, which are forming a part of sectors like hospitality, travel, tourism. I mean, for them, it's really difficult because over the next 6 months, there is no visibility with respect to the demand coming up. But at the same time, they need to keep on continuing with their cost of operations. Rather, it is increasing because you don't have any productivity coming out, but you have a cost which is going in. So it's a very typical situation to be at. But yes, what really matters, I think, in the long run would be that what we call survival of the fittest. I mean, it's like the companies who will be able to survive this particular phase, at least for the couple of more months, would be able to kind of see better light at the end of the day as compared to the other sectors.
All right. So I want to, of course, take up another point with you, but instead of only dwelling on the doom and gloom, Shashank, I want to sort of go back to some of the positives that our survey has also thrown up, and the fact that we have already seen a huge transition, and it's again something that started even pre-crisis towards going more digital. That certainly allows you to become a little bit more efficient, a little more lithe and agile, and perhaps also save some costs along the way. This huge adoption. I mean, by the way, the survey also shows that Maruti has a 10% uptick in people's interest during the lockdown. By the way, so I'm sure you're happy about that. But this whole digital thrust coming from the traditional players like yourselves, that is something that's a positive sort of an outcome. The fact that it got accelerated during the lockdown.
Yeah, so I think that's a very well said, Siddharth, because people do talk about digitalization preference going up only because of this COVID lockdown period. That's not true. If you see data for the last 3 years, actually the digitalization is very much on the way. It was on the way, and Maruti Suzuki had been developing that very robust digital platform in line with that. Remember, earlier the web inquiries used to be just about 3-4% of the total inquiries. The gold standard was the walk-ins, which used to be about 20-22%. But by last year, even before COVID, the inquiry levels were actually exceeding in the web than compared with the walk-ins. So I think the process was very much on, and our research has indicated that from the time a consumer actually decides to purchase a car, not decides, he thinks of purchasing a car, to the final delivery of the car, there are 28 touch points which he has to go through, like visit to showroom or going to get information, taking a test drive, going to banks or finance, and so on and so forth. So there are actually 28 touch points. Even before the lockdown, about 21 of them depending on how much digitalization had been affected in various OEMs and dealerships, 21 were already digitalized. It's only that now there seems to be a greater acceleration. It's an acceleration now for and even the balance, which is largely made up of test drive and delivery, and also some points relating to bank financing. I think most OEMs, including Maruti Suzuki, are very much in line with quickly try to digitalize even that. So I think the acceleration will happen. The acceleration will happen, and that would also lead to better productivity. And surely we are going to see a lot of changes in the systems and the processes of the dealership as also OEMs.
Your community has also sort of really come through and supported you on this, and they've in fact even embraced the whole move to digital over the last few months. We've all seen that. We've got Nikunj Sanghi, who's also with us on the show now. Good evening, sir, and thank you for being here. I have to ask you that when it comes to this whole adoption of this new normal, firstly, we are seeing very positive messages in our survey from dealers in particular about expecting, firstly, the sales to really bounce back much sooner than we thought. They're also expecting 6 months at the outside to be a situation from where we can come back to a greater normal. Your thoughts on what you see as being the sort of the next 3 and then 6 month scenario?
Well, I'm definitely encouraged by what I have seen in the last one fortnight, because my showroom has been open for the last one fortnight, and believe it or not, I have delivered about 30 vehicles already, and of a segment which is over 7 lakhs. So I have delivered mostly Boleros, where the on-road price is almost 10 lakhs. And the positive thing that I'm seeing is that there is not so much distress in the rural economy as we experience in the urban sectors. I think the farmer has been working for the last 2 months. He's still very positive. He's had a good harvest. He's looking at a good monsoon, and the next crop also seems to be good. And I think he's getting good prices for his crop, which I think abode very well for the industry. The rural growth, which was missing from this market pre-COVID, I think seems to be coming back much faster than the urban growth. And as I see it, by festival season, we will definitely not be anywhere near the normal, but we'll also not be as depressed as we thought we would be after almost zero retail in April and less than 30% retail in May. I think the bounce back will come, and we are hopeful that things will be much better.
And it's unprecedented what happened in April. I think we've never had that situation where there was zero sales in any month. And so certainly something that we will look back on as being a historic, absolutely crazy times perhaps for the sector, like for many other sectors. And of course, we've completely run out of time. There's much more I wanted to get into, especially the whole focus on even the used car space that starts to really bounce back in many ways in the current scenario. But for all of that, please remember that the survey, of course, is on carandbike.com. for you to go and take a look at the salient features on. And of course, I would like to thank all my guests. Tarun, I know you're back, but I would have loved to have come back to you. But like I said, completely out of time here. There's plenty more, of course, in terms of all the news updates coming up here on NDTV 24/7. I want to thank all my guests for joining us tonight and being a part of this discussion. The way forward for automobiles certainly remains a bit of a question mark, but certainly also starting to look a little bit more positive now. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you for watching.